You mentioned on the phone that it's something that people from your generation are less familiar with. It's something that's less common.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. It was just the way, certainly, we were very involved, or certainly from my family, very involved in the church from when I was born, basically. And, we worshipped and we had Bible study and we had prayer, but
Mother played the organ.
and sang, and my mother played and sang and so on, and led Sunday school and lots of things. But
They were known as a Christian family.
yeah, we didn't talk much about our individual experience of faith. It wasn't sort of part of the scene, other than I can recall talking a bit about it when we went through membership classes as a teenager. But it wasn't something, in Sunday school, for example, we talked about the lesson and that sort of thing and so on, but not much about our own personal experiences. And it was just where I was part of the Methodist Church in those days.
It is interesting. I mean, I'm really grateful to get to have this chat with you, because I often find talking about these sorts of things really edifying, and an opportunity to hear from people who are further along the path, than me. So I really look forward to this.
Well past the 60 years and 10.
I wasn't going to ask how old you are, so I'm glad you pointed that out. Yeah.
So everything now is a bonus.
Yeah. Praise God. Can I pray for us?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Lord, thank you for this chance to chat together. I want to pray for this conversation, Lord, that you would be at work in it. I want to pray for Geoff and Sue, that you would help them to feel comfortable sharing their stories, and Lord, that at the end of the day, you would be glorified.
Amen. Thank you.
So if you want to start by, firstly, tell us a little bit about your family and maybe how long you've been at this church.
Sorry,
Your family and how long you've been at this church.
Our family consists of 3 children and 18 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren, nearly. The 4th is due in July. We lived on the south coast. I didn't come from a Christian family at all. I didn't have the experience that Geoff had. And it wasn't probably until the Billy Graham crusade that I became a Christian, a lukewarm Christian. But I'm going off the path.
That's okay. Why don't you tell us about?
Pardon?
Can you tell us about that? So you heard about
Yes,
Jesus at Billy Graham.
As a child, I lived at Balgownie on the south coast, and from there we went to the Snowy Mountains, and I lived down there with my parents for 4 years. And then we came back to Corrimal, and pretty dysfunctional life actually. I had an alcoholic as a father, and it wasn't until the Billy Graham crusade that my sister, who's 8 years older than I am, talked Dad and Mum into going to the Billy Graham crusade, and we went as a family. And Dad seemed to change. He went forward, and I went too, and I could say probably around that time onwards he stopped drinking, and I was about 15 at that age, at that stage. stayed. So I was allowed to go to church, and it was the Methodist church in Corrimal. Mum and Dad didn't come with me, though, but I was allowed to go and join the Methodist Youth Fellowship. And from there on, that's where I met Geoff. And looking back, I think I can see that God had his hand in my life, because they say that you have to be equally yoked when you become one. And I was a lukewarm Christian. So I wanted to have fun. And by the time Geoff proposed to me, I was only 20. And anyway, I was thrilled that I was asked to be married. He asked me to marry him, and I loved him. But then the old devil kicked in and started to say, hey, you're only 20, you know. And my father said that I didn't know when I was on a good thing when I approached the subject with him. He said, when you're on a good thing, you stick to it. And so I became a little frightened to back out of our engagement, but looking back, God had this planned. And through a lot of trials with our children, our 3 children, we've all been married twice, and that carries a bit of trauma with it and stress, and a son in the middle who's had an addiction, real addiction, since he was about 20. Started in high school at a Christian school. We've travelled on together with God as our master. And looking back, we can see that he's had his hand on our marriage and on all the traumas. And he's been able to carry me at times. But was only in probably January this year when we were over with our middle son, who is yet again in a rehab at the age of 50. He'll be 51 next year, and he's been in there for 12 months. 51 this year, in July, sorry. And he's been in the rehab Shalom in Perth for 12 months now. And we had a reconciliation with him, and it was only then that I was able to disclose to Geoff, you know, things that I'd done in my life before we were married that I wasn't proud of, and I knew God knew, and God had forgiven me, but I'd never asked Geoff to forgive me. And yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing.
Because our marriage now is 56 years in a month or two. Been married, and a great journey. My journey, basically, I've always been involved in the church. There was never a time when I wasn't, and always been very active in the church. I think being active has helped me in my Christian walk, with experiences and with contact with so many different people, and so many different roles and so on. And like Sue, I was involved in the Billy Graham Crusade in '59, and that was when I think a lot of the relationship with Jesus started to develop. I guess I regard myself as just an ordinary run-of-the-mill Christian. I haven't had any earth-shattering experiences or anything like that, but I just see that I'm like many within the total Christian family who, go about, love their God and go about doing, what they can do to help in the community and in his church in so many different ways. And I guess I still try and do that and take on things that I don't think I have the strength to do, and rely upon him in that regard. And some of the other experiences that have developed me have been, as a youngster, was church camps and beach mission, and probably more lately, for a number of years, when I attended Hillsong Conference, and that was a great time of worship and fellowship. And I guess that's something we miss a bit in terms of having a whole group of people together, large group, which we don't do very often these days in worshipping and singing God's praise. And in terms of worshipping together and singing, that's one way that we can all participate in worship rather than in just listening to someone talk. And it reminded me of something I was reading the other day a bit at the opening of Solomon's Temple, when there's this huge group of people there and 120 trumpeters. I just couldn't imagine what that noise and that celebration would be like in terms of worshipping God. It must have been a magnificent and great experience for all those that were there. But whether we do that today, I don't know. Gather all those instruments and 120 people worshipping, blowing trumpets and all the others. Be a great Christian witness and experience for all those involved.
What about the MIF district rallies we used to have, where we walked down the street in Corrimal with banners witnessing to our faith? There was quite a group of young people that used to do that, that we don't do today.
We used to do walks. We walked from Port Kimberley to Bulli to raise money, for the whole group of young people.
All with God
banners and things,
in our hearts. So.
Anyway, I guess we can look back, but we do try and look forward, even at this stage.
It's good, though, to look back, because you can actually see God's hand on your life and how he has directed us and carried us at times, a bit like the footsteps in the sand where there's two prints and he's beside you, and then there's only one, and you know that God's carrying you.
Geoff, do you want to tell us about, Sue shared a bit about kind of how you two met each other from her experience. Do you want to tell us about it from your experience?
Well, it was through MYF, which was Methodist Youth Fellowship, and there were groups of Methodist Youth Fellowship that used to come together in districts, and I was part of the Dapto MYF. Sue was part of Corrimal MYF, but the South Coast District, we would come together every now and again for rallies and that sort of thing. And it's like, I guess that's how...
And camps.
And camps, yes, how we met. And also, through the Crusader Camp movement, which was part of Methodist Church, and a number of those camps were held on the South Coast. And that was basically how we met. And
I was a bit of a flirt.
Sue would recall our first day out or time out, which was actually we came to Sydney for a rally, because quite often we would come up from the South Coast to a rally in Sydney, either Church of Christ or something like that at what was then Scott's Church or the Town Hall. That was, quite an occasion for us. And Sue came with me one night, and
First night.
She had a ladder in a stocking, which she wasn't happy about, but I had some lollies that she could suck and try and stop it from running. But Sue will tell you a lot of people about that incident of our first time we went out together.
Sorry, I'm trying not to speak because I don't want to interrupt the recording. That's a very funny story.
Well, I was like to impress. First date, dragged my foot across my heel, tore my stocking, and I thought, the front.
Because stockings were a very important part of ladies' attire in those days. Mm-hmm. We're talking about early 1960s.
62.
62, wasn't it?
63. Because we were married in 64. And I was 15 at Billy Graham, so there's a short window there, but...
So then, Geoff, you kind of started to date, I guess, and then how did it kind of lead to the proposal and then the marriage?
Well, just it. I didn't necessarily have a fixed forward plan. It was just the way things evolved, and in those days, people tended to marry much younger than what they do now.
Today.
And all of our friends, that we had at that stage, a lot of them married around that time. Friends we had in the church and in YF and that. And that was just the way things went, with a church wedding and a reception afterwards.
And a reception without alcohol.
Yes.
Good Methodist. Yeah.
No, but my father
of course.
could only smell alcohol, and he'd be drunk, and he'd stop drinking. In fact, his grandchildren, you were a great-granddad.
Yes, so that's how it happened. And we've been together ever since. There've been a few ups and downs, and not everything's been rosy, but we've survived.
Thank you so much for sharing. I want to ask questions.
Yep.
I feel like there's so much to say.
Yep.
So much to take in. Really, the questions that I have written down here are the ones that you've answered even without my asking. So that's really good.
But I think prayer means a lot to me, and God does answer prayer. And our children were given the opportunity to accept Christ and to follow him in their growing up, and they made their choices. And today, our addicted son is the one who has followed Christ, even though he's
Honourable.
fallen again.
And again
Um,
and again.
and again and again. The devil is very strong. And I think he has embraced God, this rehab, the strongest. And his second wife is one of God's servants, very faithful servant, and she and Marty work together with God's leadership, and we just continue to pray that he will find what God has in store for him. He's working with Shalom at the moment, and I think he would like to continue, but what happens down the track, is between them and God. Nothing we can do to change other people's immediate thoughts other than to demonstrate our love for Christ. So,
with our relationship with Martin, which is his addicted relationship's gone on for 30 years. And one of the things we've found is that we've just got to let him go and let God, because
we can't
in
fix
the
it.
early days we were, in a sense, just reinforcing what he was doing by paying some of his debts and things like that. But he said a number of periods where he's been homeless, living on the streets and so on, and we've just had to let it go, because all we were doing was really reinforcing his behaviour. It's very, very difficult for parents in that circumstance. If I could just share a couple of things in terms of my walk. One of the things that I find useful in my growth as a Christian is my daily devotions, and I follow a program of reading the whole Bible, which I've now read probably 3 or 4 times over the years, so that I take the warts with the good stuff, because there is a lot of, particularly in the Old Testament, that is fairly horrendous things that God was involved with. But I find that doing a portion each day of various parts of the Bible, following a program, that's good for me. And a couple of things that's standing out in my readings at the moment. One is Jeremiah and his dedication as a servant of God, what he went through over a long period of time. And it was tremendous. And the other one I've mentioned earlier about Solomon and David before him, in the whole process of constructing the temple and the celebration and so on. Both David and Solomon were people who had major problems in their lives in terms of following Jesus. So they were just, in a sense, one would call normal people, but really used by God in great ways.
Is there anything else that you guys wanted to share? Like if you think about, maybe the younger generations or people who are in the midst of the parenting now. I mean, a lot of your story speaks to that experience.
Just rely on God's guidance, that he doesn't ignore you, he does hear your prayers. And 2 books in the Bible that I find most helpful were Proverbs and James, one from each of the Old and the New Testament. But I think to have Christ in your lives, in your living, in your breathing is a wonderful benefit.
Thanks so much for sharing.
Okay.
Actually, before I press stop, can we pray?
Yes.
It's be nice to pray. Lord, I just want to give you thanks and praise for the work that you've done in the lives of Geoff and Sue. Thank you, Lord, for the way that you've saved both of them early on in their life and how you've brought them together and the way they've served you through their marriage, their family, children, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren. Thank you so much,